Yeah, morning, Chair. You're good to go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and apologies once again for the 3 minutes late start. That's entirely my fault, but let's launch straight in. I do have some apologies for absence from Councillor Kate Hart, Councillor Claire Strong, and Debbie Ingham from Unison. I believe we've got some reps that also are unable to make it, but we do have some CF reps here, so we're good. Okay, Chair's announcements. This meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available to you on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcement on the agenda. Item 3, notifications of other business. I have no other business to be taken at this meeting. So item 4 then, staff consultation forum. We are to receive the minutes of the forum meeting held in March 20, July 20, August 20 and September 20. And Ian Cooper, I believe that you're here to present that with us.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just do a short introduction and we can focus on any questions or comments on it. Obviously, you notice there's quite a gap in the middle of it there between April, May and June being missing. That was obviously for reasons we're aware of. We were sort of struggling to work out how we could do a meaningful staff consultation in that period as we adapted to the new way of doing things. We are now doing them on Zoom and I think they're working pretty well. So engagement there, so that's all good and positive. I think you'll notice with the notes that in March you were talking about hand sanitizers, and then suddenly in July we were talking about not being in the office at all. So you can sort of see the transition as we adapted to the new way of doing things. You'll notice sort of the focus on how things have changed in relation to working at the office, IT, and also staff welfare, and how we've adapted to that. I suppose away from that, there is reference in there to pay bargaining, which has now been agreed at 2.75%, which you'll see elsewhere in the other reports in the agenda. And obviously all the usual kind of queries, questions and general engagement about what's going on at the council. I think I'll probably stop there and invite questions rather than going through it any more detail than that.
That's very lovely. Thank you, Ian. Any questions or comments? Any questions or comments on those minutes? Are we happy to accept those minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, do I need to take a vote on that?
No, Chair, that's fine.
Okay, okay then, shall we move on then to the HR update, and that's back to you again, Ian.
Good morning, everybody. Apologies, Kate, I'm late, but I have joined.
That's right, thank you. Welcome, Claire.
So yeah, just to note in paragraph 3.1, obviously there wasn't a JFCC meeting in June. You were provided with information notes, which hopefully you will have a chance to read, which focused on, as you'd expect, COVID-19 and the sort of HR response to that and how we supported our staff through it. And there are further details of that in paragraph 3.4 of the report. 3.2 focuses on the shift of the people strategy. Obviously, the intention before was we do a long-term 5-year people strategy. And that doesn't seem like the right thing to be doing at this current time, and therefore we'll do a shorter-term strategy focusing on the people aspects, the recovery from COVID-19, and then when the time is right, in due course, we'll look at a longer-term strategy, which seems like the right thing to be doing. In reference to paragraph 3.3, which mentions shaping our future, the first meeting of that group, that steering group, was last week. It was a very productive first meeting, and in the second meeting we're going to focus on 2 main areas. Firstly, there'll be some staff workshops happening in early October, obviously via Zoom, and we'll hope to get some feedback from those. It's very much an information gathering stage, and then kind of what the wider staffing population feel about sort of the organisational culture, where we're going and how we can get better. So key to get that information. Obviously aware that the steering group is a very, whilst we're trying to kind of get a broad range of people there, but it's still quite narrow, which is obviously necessary to make a productive and meeting. So therefore the input from others is key to that and listening to that. For the next meeting of the Shaping Our Future Steering Group, we're also going to look at the terms of reference for our new Equality and Diversity group. So the Gender Pay Gap group has changed its focus and widened its focus to consider all forms of equality and diversity, not just the gender female-male pay gap. So there's a positive move, and looking at how we can fully engage that group and make that a really meaningful contribution both into shaping our future and more widely. The other bit I wanted to cover in terms of an update in relation to the exit payment cap. It's now been announced that's probably going to come before Parliament next week, and therefore could be in place by the end of October, which is a lot sooner than we were expecting. There's a lot of concern out there around the fact that there's still nothing in terms of actually any guidance been published or any equalities impact assessment or those kind of things, which you'd hope to see by now. And at the moment, any legislation would conflict with the local government pension scheme regulations, and that's probably going to be in place until the end of the year, until they get amended to react to whatever the legislation is going to be. We've got a good idea, but it's still going to go through Parliament. So if there was to be an exit above that level in the intervening period, it's going to cause quite a lot of complexity and confusion. I don't think we've got any coming up. I'm pretty sure we haven't. So it's not going to be a problem for us, but I'm sure it will be a problem for some other organisations. Obviously, a lot more detail in that report around everything that's going on, covering all sorts of areas from sickness levels to staff turnover and everything in between. But rather than go through every single bit of it, I will leave it there and then invite questions. And obviously, either I will try and answer them, or there's some other knowledgeable people around who can also help answer them too.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Ian. So we'll just throw that out. Are there any questions or comments on that? Terry Hone, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Really, I guess it's mental health for staff. It's doesn't get mentioned a lot in there. We do mention other things we're doing. It is a grave concern, I think, for many people that being locked away for all this period of time, perhaps in darkened rooms or perhaps with people you might not want to be with, and that gets covered, I know. But certainly, mental health. Do you think we're doing enough for mental health of our staff in these circumstances? Thoughts, please.
A really good question. Thank you, Terry. I'd like to add some weight behind that as well. Of just with this morning's, yesterday's news, and obviously we're looking towards a March kind of. I don't know how to call it. Perhaps we're looking at further restrictions towards March, and obviously mentally that's quite a difficult challenge to consider, especially as people were just starting to enjoy themselves. So I also think that we have got something more progressive than wellbeing issues that are about to face us. And I think that what we may be looking at is something where, take a walk at lunchtime might not be okay advice, but actually we need to move a little bit further forward than that. So I'm interested also to hear perhaps from Kerry, kind of what plans there are in place.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, we've done an awful lot around this particular area because right from the start, we've expected that there would be an enormous impact on people's mental health and well-being, and certainly mental health as the lockdown progressed. The start point of that, which has been mentioned at various times, we did some welfare calls. So we divvied up all the staff in the organisation and shared those among the HR team. And the HR team very steadfastly worked through all of those to call people to ask how they were. And obviously, one of the things that we wanted to do was find out, were any people struggling? And, to roadmap them to an enormous amount of support that we already have. So we have a confidential employee assistance programme, specifically there really for dealing with mental health issues and you know, domestic issues and all sorts of things. And obviously all that are on the intranet pages with some dedicated coronavirus intranet pages, mental health first aiders, which we have recruited and helped to train. And what else? Gosh, something's just gone out of my head, which was really important, but you know, a whole wealth of things that we're doing. I mean, occupational health, all those sorts of things. And the lockdown toolkit was a big piece of work that was done. So a toolkit for people to help them during that time. And we keep developing that as the virus goes on. So there's been a lot of work going on specifically around mental health and people's well-being.
Thank you, Kerry. Terry, does that satisfy your question?
Well, yes, it does. Thank you. I seem to have just gone through the notes again. That the phone round was in April time, wasn't it? When we phoned round everybody.
It was, yeah.
If that's the case. Should we not move on from that now, because that was 4 or 5 months ago, and life has changed. What life was like in April, I know for me, if the mental issue, perhaps it was different in April to what it is in September. So
I have been.
Should you do again? I don't know.
Sorry. Yeah, I've been thinking along the same lines myself. I mean, I'm working, as Ian mentioned, we're looking at a sort of short-term people COVID recovery plan, and I'm doing a specific bit in that about where we go forward with mental health from here on in, because, you know, this is obviously going to go on for a long time, and we've got to be there to support people. So I've been thinking about whether we need to rerun that process and carry out more calls, but perhaps this time with more information about the various things that have been put together over the intervening period than we had when we initially made those calls to people, because obviously COVID came down very quickly.
I think, did you want to speak at this point or a different point? I see that your hand is up. Ian?
Oh, yes, I was close. Yes, just going to say that, yes, we are, because Kerry's leaving soon, I've sort of been doing some stuff that Kerry may not be completely aware of, so part of the transition. So we are looking at rolling out some support for managers to help staff. So rather than doing welfare calls to individuals, we're doing welfare calls to managers to help them have the welfare calls with staff, which I think probably gets put this a more sustainable position ongoing. And also we are looking at the staff survey we did, and there are some specific comments in that which we are following up on. Some people now have highlighted issues, and we're sort of going through those and making sure those people are getting specific support as well. And that happened much later. That's happened in August time. So that is picking up some issues that have emerged since the original welfare calls.
I think that's really positive. Thank you, Ian, and thanks for that update. And Kerry, I know this is your last meeting, so you're entirely forgiven for not having the entire information. I do just want to pick you up on that and see who is best to answer. And I'm aware that I've got a number of hands up, but I'm going to just monopolise this while I can. I'm keen to understand. I think that's a very good approach to go through the managers. It's obviously a very large task for one small team, and I think that going through the line managers is entirely appropriate. So therefore, what support is available for those line managers? And I'm thinking along the lines of, you know, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? And things are going to get quite significantly tougher, in my view. And so is there a programme that is set up specifically for people who are holding the hands of others going through difficult times? Is it Joe? I'm sorry, I've only got your job titles. Joe, your hand is up. Is that something that you want to talk on?
Yeah, it was just thank you. I'll just put my hand down now. Just to add to Ian's point, really, that we will be supporting managers. The Employee Assistance Programme also has a managers section to it, So if you're a manager managing somebody with mental health issues or personal problems or whatever, then certainly there's access to the system, to the advice line and the website resources for managers. Obviously, there's members of the HR team that can also support, as well as Kerry mentioned, the mental health first aiders. But the other point I just wanted to kind of go back to the initial round of welfare calls. The majority of staff were getting used to working from home on a full-time basis, and there might have been some technical issues, but certainly from a mental health point of view, most staff were kind of coping okay. Just to highlight that there were a number of people who have had some mental health problems, and just to really highlight that we've obviously got those people on our radar already. Some members of the team have been keeping in a more regular contact. So after that initial call, we agreed some regular follow-up calls. So I know one of my colleagues was calling a member of staff probably once a week, once a fortnight initially, just to kind of see how, keep on top of things and get some more feedback. But certainly we've been able to work more closely with those that have needed the most support, and we'll continue to do that because obviously they'll be on our radar now.
Thank you, Jo. And just while I've got you, any work being done with obviously the prevalence of domestic violence? We're reading a lot about that, and we're reading a lot about how vulnerable people now that they are in the home an awful lot more. And coming to the office was often a respite for people in difficult situations at home. Has there been any evidence of that, or any? Do we have an ability to increase our kind of knowledge of that, or are we able to signpost people in the right way for those instances and those issues?
I'm not aware of any cases. As you say, it's something that's obviously quite a very difficult subject for people to bring up. Funny enough, it was brought up I was at the Heads of HR for Hertfordshire meeting last week, and there was a suggestion there that there's a white ribbon campaign that's going on, that we can actually maybe raise awareness through our intranet thing. So I was due to speak to the community safety manager who leads on domestic violence and so on, outside of the for residents and outside of the council. So I'll be picking that up with her, and maybe just gently but kind of making sure that the access to those kind of resources are available for staff on the staff intranet.
I think that's I'd like to see that, certainly, and if you could bring that and just give us an update at the next meeting, I would value that. I think certainly that the need for silent signals while we're all doing things remotely is incredibly important, and just statistically there is likely to be some people that are in very challenging situations in an HDC, just looking at the stats. So I think that would be really, really valuable.
Thank you.
Claire Strong. Cannot hear you at all. No. Can anyone else hear Claire? If you can put your thumbs up if you can. No, we're all shaking our heads, Claire. You're not muted. I do speak sign language if that's helpful. We'll just wait for Claire to plug in. I'm afraid I really can't hear you. IT, are we able to test Claire's audio with her? And maybe I'll just go to Ian, who had his hand up, although that's gone back again.
I can fill in. Just wanted to say that whilst we are trying to minimise the number of people in the offices, where there is a need, either from a work or a personal perspective, we are getting people into the office if it's going to help their welfare. So we're not just saying blanket no in the office. We are trying to manage numbers down to keep people as safe as possible in the offices, but we are aware there are multiple reasons why people might want to come into the offices to work. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think in the statement yesterday that was made quite clear, wasn't it, that if you need to be in for your mental health or well-being, then it is appropriate for you to do so. Certainly while we still have that freedom to be able to do that, I think it's important that we take advantage of that. So thank you, Ian. Have we resolved Claire's issues? Well, the audio ones. Oh dear. Vic, are you able to jump in here and give us some advice as to what we should be doing if one of our meeting are unable to speak to the meeting?
Yeah, it might be worth Claire joining us via telephone call. Has Claire got the telephone number that Matt can provide? Join the meeting that way.
One moment, let me have a look.
Does anybody else wish to comment on the HR update? Keith, you did have your hand up at one point.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I mean, the question was answered really in that I think Kerry said this was ongoing and provided ways in which this was going to be ongoing through the managers, which I think is really good. I don't know if there's some benefit in providing a general mental health welfare webinar that people could log into remotely rather than wait until we deal with people on a one-to-one basis. I just posit that as a possible.
Joe, Kerry, Ian, which of you wish to pick that one up? An online webinar for mental health rather than being dealt with one-to-one?
Well as really, you
as
know,
well
so
as.
that people, it's just to raise awareness.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're contacted all the time by providers that will offer this sort of thing. And those that look really interesting will obviously circulate onto managers to say if they feel that that's a good idea. It's quite a good idea as well, Keith, that I might talk to our Keith in HR about perhaps doing something ourselves that we could do for managers. So yeah, I mean, we can certainly have a look at that going forward.
Thank you. Lee, you have a question or a comment?
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to support everything that HR are saying. I think the Shaping Our Future initiative and the new Equality and Diversity group are really going to feed into supporting people's mental health. As Kerry said, we have a team of mental health first aiders across the council who it might be something going forward that maybe we could think about coming together and then being able to support other people. But in terms of the Equality and Diversity group, we were looking at little pockets of support for people with different characteristics, but that would also very much encompass mental health because that's kind of the underlying thing for everyone, really. So thank you.
Thank you, Leah. I just want to move the conversation away from mental health a little bit, although acknowledging that we will come back to that once Claire's able to get her audio working. I'm interested to know how the equalities and diversity work is going from a recruitment perspective. So there's been some really forward-thinking initiatives that we've talked about in previous meetings, particularly I think around software that we've talked about for recruitment adverts, removing any unconscious bias, and therefore increasing our diversity. I think that is the other theme to emerge from 2020, and I'd just like to make sure that we're keeping it on the agenda. How is that going? How is the software performing well? Are there any other initiatives as well? Yeah, if we could just have a little bit of an update on that, because I didn't see it in the paper. I'd value that.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I mean, obviously, all that work was part of the gender pay gap work plan. So a number of initiatives that we tried. The software you're referring to was one that we used to search out words that might be sort of more attractive to men rather than women and put off women from applying. So it's a good piece of software where it just suggests alternative words that you can use, and we've applied it to job adverts, person specifications, job descriptions, and even the interview notes or the interview questions to make sure we're not using the wrong sort of language. So Joe specifically has been dealing with recruitment directly, so Joe may have a little bit more to say on this.
Joe, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, just yes, to reiterate what Kerry said, really, we are still using the software. We've Keith in our from our HR team has relatively recently done some unconscious bias training, which I think was probably referred to in a previous information note. So yeah, it is very much still on our agenda. We're also looking forward to working with the new equalities and diversity group to look at other ways that we can feed into that piece of work, which is obviously broader than just recruitment.
And has it, obviously we don't have kind of data in front of us, and that's fine, but just kind of anecdotally, is the work that we're doing working? So that the removing words that are more that will encourage more men than women, is that increasing the amount of applications that we're getting from women? Is the other stuff, is it working or not working, or
I think it's very hard to. I think it's very hard to say at the moment, to be honest. We will have the equalities data. We obviously review our equalities data annually, and that's something that we'll do at the end of this year and be able to do some kind of comparison. I think obviously during the coronavirus, we've had a real dip in recruitment generally. And in addition to that, more recently, I suppose, we've had a number of people, sort of the larger number of people applying for the vacancies just because of the current economic climate. So there are obviously a lot of factors in there. But yeah, feeling like it's important that we continue to do it, and it's certainly something that we want to keep on the agenda to keep an eye on. But I think maybe once we've looked at the equalities data at the end of the year, that might be able to give us a bit more of an indication.
Brilliant. Really pleased to hear that, Joe. Thank you. Claire, I think we have you.
I've come back. Can you hear me? Note to the IT department, my laptop still doesn't work. Even though I had an IT kick, it was allegedly fixed it, but I'll have a look at that again later. Yeah, just coming back to where I know you were talking about mental health. And I mean, I was somebody who did remote working for a lot of my life and with remote teams. And I know we put a lot of emphasis on sort of making sure that managers and HR are able to try and identify employees who perhaps don't like this new working environment. However, there are lots of positives, and a lot of employers will like it. And I think it's encouraging employees themselves to talk amongst themselves, and it's the regular having of the team meetings, not just us managers, because often an employee won't talk to their manager, won't talk to HR. But they will talk to a work colleague, and I think that's the listening aspect, that it's helping others really, and if that's an encouragement again within that managers need to encourage with their staff to talk together, to share good experiences of how to work, and also for other employers. It's not sort of whatever that word is sort of spilling on your co-workers, but it's actually drawing managers and HR to attention to those that won't speak up for themselves, but their colleagues at work will know that they've got those difficulties, and getting them to sort of say to their manager, I think so-and-so needs a little bit more help.
That's a really interesting point, Claire. Thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to dial in and to get audio and make that point. I wonder whether the mental health first aid course, and one doesn't want to process everything around talking to each other, because that's obviously a cultural thing that doesn't need processes, just needs a safe environment. But I wonder whether the mental health first aid training that you've suggested covers that, and covers the aspect of talking peer to peer, and whether or not that is helpful, or whether there's anything further that we could be doing. And I don't know who to. This is a complicated one, isn't it? I send that to Kerry always. Kerry, off you go. You're still here.
That's a very good point made by Claire, and what we would hope is that team meetings are going on as normally. All right, with some fits and starts with trying to use different sorts of methods of meeting face to face, virtually. you know, starting with Teams, you know, we had problems at the beginning, but obviously Zoom is working well now. I mean, if I use HR as an example, we've been having regular team meetings once a week, just doing updates. We've been having social quiz nights and, you know, manager meetings as well as whole department meetings. So, yes, I mean, I would hope that teams are doing that. And I mean, obviously that's somewhere we can make some checks around what's happening in teams, but you know, we haven't had anything that's suggesting that those things are not happening.
I wonder whether it goes a bit further than that, though, to say, you know, some of the things that have certainly been lost, and there are many positives to being at home, but some things have been lost, and that is the nipping out for a coffee with your
yeah,
and have a good old rant with, and they'll pick up, won't they, when, you know, this is a rant or this is quite a serious problem. I know my mates at work would, and so yeah, is there anything that we can do to kind of have those kitchen catch-ups where people are making a cup of tea together and how you're doing? Is there anything going on to help with those informal conversations that where a lot of this stuff, as Claire rightly says, is picked up? Kerry again.
well, obviously we can't answer really for what's happening in each team. I would hope so. I would really hope so. It could be, I mean, I will find out a little bit more about the work that Keith's been doing. The lockdown toolkit had lots of advice about, you know, how people interact and what they should do. So, you know, at the moment, I can't say on behalf of the organisation that every team is working in the same way that HR are working and this is happening consistently. Perhaps it's something that Ian can raise at a leadership team meeting to start the cascade to find out whether these things are working as they should via the service directors.
Yeah, I think there's scope there, isn't there? Ian, you've got your hand up, wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to sort of confirm what Kerry said, I've got sort of, I suppose, another perspective. You know, I am aware of more teams that are using WhatsApp groups, Microsoft Teams to check in on each other, and they're having these sort of ad hoc conversations. It's not all through the manager, but I do think there is work that I can do around helping to sort of get that message that the culture is sort of to reaffirm the culture that this is allowed. You know, you're not wasting work time. You can have a chat in work time and chat to your colleagues. That is allowed. That's that's part of what we do at work, and we have to adapt to different ways of doing it when we can't do it, making a cup of tea or whatever else we're doing. So I will do whatever I can to kind of help that message to get out there.
I think that's really helpful. Thank you. And just to kind of add a couple of bits in as well. I know of some organisations. It depends very much on your demographic, but there are some where the use of Facebook is working really well, where managers have actively introduced Facebook groups, which enables them to see their colleagues and kind of get a bit more of an understanding of where they are at. And so where there are problems emerging, they are able to then address those and get that early intervention in. And I've seen that be very successful. There's a fine line, obviously, between stalking somebody on the internet and just keeping in touch with them online in other aspects of their life to make sure that they're doing okay. But I do think it's an employer's responsibility to do that. Claire, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to come back and saying, obviously, you know, staff surveys that you're doing, again, you know, looking at that, and there's some of the questions in there that you can use to try and pick up on that. And the other thing I was going to say, I see Lee keeps waving at us, and I don't know if that's because she doesn't realise there's a raise hand button, and that's what we use to. Oh, she can't talk, or she's not. I don't know if she wanted to come in.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to work, my raised hand. I don't know if I'm supposed to just sit here and watch, you see. So.
Oh no, one of the things we want is
Lee, unmute and shout. That works.
Okay. Yeah, going back to we still have our staff social committee. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but Sarah Jenkinson sort of hosts that, and there are various staff representatives. They used to organise after work drinks. Obviously that's not happened, but they have been, you know, thinking as hard as they can about ways of pulling people together socially, and they put together a selection of quizzes, because as Kerry said, some teams have been doing quizzes regularly, so we've saved those and sent them, so they're available on the intranet. I'm a mental health first aider. I've not been approached by anyone. Maybe it's because it's me, but you know, we'll never know. But I think what we need to really do is publicise it more. It needs to be much more of a regular thing. I mean, the intranet message board is not used very much, and it could be. I think it could be used more to just remind people, this is going on. We're still here. Here's the quizzes. Talk to each other, and the staff briefings, I think, are really good to remind everyone that we're all still there. I mean, actually, I've not seen anyone from planning since March, so I hope they're all okay.
That's a really good point, Leah. Thank you for raising that, and do just unmute and shout. I will hear you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that there will be teams that won't organically be working together, and so if we're in this for another 6 months in this way, I think that there does need to be a more formal approach. I wonder whether, certainly talking back to the mental health aspect, I wonder how open the culture is to discussing challenges with mental health. I've seen definite successes where senior people in organisations have been brave enough to share their own challenges, and have felt that that's a safe thing to do. And working on psychological safety within the organisation, I think, is always key. Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting served a snack, which is always lovely when you're at home. And I'd like to ask that question, and perhaps if I could throw that to Leah, how do you feel mental health is discussed across the organisation, and culturally, do you think it's open enough?
I think we're doing really well at trying to increase awareness overall. We've still got a way to go, but obviously mental health is something that is still very much stigmatised. But as an organisation, you know, we're really taking that on board and recognising it, and especially in terms of, again, the gender pay gap that's now the equality and diversity group, and shaping our future. They are ideal platforms to establish support groups, network groups, to bring everyone together, to acknowledge that we all have some things in common, that we all have difficulties, and that it is a place where we can talk about it, whether it be in a group of a small number or a larger number, or one-to-one on the telephone or via Zoom. And I think, again, it's the publicity around that and the understanding of that's what the group is trying to do, is that, you know, so we're in this together. In terms of mental health, we are, you know, because we've all got a mental health. It just needs acknowledging. You know, the thing, if you've got a broken arm or a leg, you can see it. You've got issues because of stuff going on at home, whether you know, we put on a brave face because we're British and that's what we do. But we're sort of, we need to acknowledge now that we're vulnerable underneath, and the more we can talk to each other and share our feelings and stuff, the better it can be. And I really do think we are on the path towards getting somewhere with that.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think just to bring this to a close, it was a great question from yourself, Terry. Thank you for raising it. I think that mental health is always going to be key. I think we have a moral imperative as an employer, and because of where we sit in the community. Thank you. I think we have a moral imperative to take it very seriously. And also, you know, whichever box you want ticked, there's also a big point there about early intervention with mental health will save an awful lot of resources across the council. And I think we need to take that very seriously. The impact of poor mental health is severe when we look at those absence rates, and the absence rates and the staff turnover right now are very good. And maintaining a good, strong mental health culture where people are able, as Leah says, to talk about that, I think is key to maintaining those really good stats. So applaud you, obviously doing a great job, and keep it up, and let's carry on doing more. So yeah, unless there are any further questions or comments, I will move on to the next point on the agenda, which is our strategic discussion. Bear with me while I flip in and out of documents.
Excuse me, Chair.
Oh,
when
sorry.
you did the staff consultation, you only did one of the 3 months. There was a full 3 months worth there. We did the July ones, but we didn't go through the August or the September ones.
Oh, okay. Did you want to revert back, Ian? Did you? I thought you'd kind of covered all 3 in your introduction.
I did a sort of summary overview of what was on there. I didn't pick up all the specific points, but happy to go back if anyone wants to raise anything on any of the there's 4 months. There's March, July, August, and September. Happy to take any of the questions on any of them.
Did you have any comments on the others?
No, it's fine. It's just we normally do go through, and to be honest, most months, I know it's all different at the moment, but most months there's questions on them from member side.
I'm making an assumption that everybody has read all of those through. If there are any questions on any of the other months, do feel free to raise it now. Claire.
It's not a comment, it's an observation about the apologies to those meetings. Particularly from senior management, and I just wondered whether or not that was something that the committee felt there might be some improvement if we made a little comment about it for the future.
So the specific comment is what?
Well, it does seem that when you look at the apologies for those meetings, the senior management doesn't seem to always be there at the meeting. And I just wondered whether or not we might be able to some way encourage perhaps that senior management is there, particularly as we have a new organisation. Just an observation.
So Anthony Roche.
That's one that doesn't seem to be a regular attender, and I just wondered whether that was something perhaps we could comment on.
I think we should note that, absolutely. Any objections to us noting that? Oh, Ian, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I am the senior management rep that is, I try to go to every meeting. I think I did manage to go to all those 4. Anthony,
Don't take it
I know, but Anthony has said that, yeah, he will try and go as many as he can. It's been quite a busy period for him, but he has an ambition to go to as many as he can. Obviously, didn't do very well for those 4 months, but I'll remind him that he needs to try and get to some, because yeah, obviously it's useful to have him there as a kind of just as the position he's in.
Thank you.
I think absolutely. Let's note that and give him the positive encouragement that he may need to attend as many as possible in the future, presuming that.
Well, for me, we have a new organisation, a new leadership, and I just noted that I think I'd like to see in there a bit more.
Excellent. Any objections to us noting that and passing that forward? No. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so if everybody's happy to move on, then we're going to go to item number 7. I have to flip in and out again. I hate doing this. Item number 7. Item number 6, a strategic discussion paper. And Kerry, you're going to present this one on knowledge management.
Yes, okay. Obviously, quite a short paper. Something that we ran past JSCC an awful long time ago as a discussion topic. But I thought it might be a good one to talk about, particularly given that I'm about to leave the organisation. And obviously, sharing of knowledge is a very important thing. As I say here, perhaps not absolutely necessary for every job, but particularly for, perhaps management and professional roles where, they may do as we say here, unique tasks that require both experience and wisdom and reasoning to complete them efficiently. And it's really about capturing that detailed knowledge before people leave the organisation. And hopefully a piece of work that I've done, in particular, I'm handing on to Jo. It would otherwise be Rebecca. So we've had like a double whammy in HR with Rebecca going on to maternity leave and obviously myself going. And I've done this piece of work. So I've broken down literally everything it is that I do and shared my experience of it, how you go about it, who else has knowledge of it, where there are other contacts that people can go to that may help deal with that. That could be regional partners. So, you know, I've been in contact with the Eastern Region area and Hertfordshire HR group to see, you know, are they willing to help Jo particularly if she's got any questions and queries. So we've established contacts there. And I think, you know, effectively what I'm saying is that this might be a bit of a role model, and we could tie it in with our learning and development, and particularly our leavers process, and you know, perhaps sort of coach and mentor teams to know what knowledge management is and how to use it. So it's a short paper that's very broadly described what knowledge management is, and because I chose the topic this time, I thought it might be a good time to talk about what we've been doing in HR to prepare for a handover. But hopefully this is something we might be able to share across the organisation, particularly with people that have been with us in senior roles for a very long time, which might be a very effective way of supporting a good handover.
So it sounds as though, Kerry, you create a bit of a blueprint there for how to kind of manage that knowledge. Is there any input from anybody else in terms of things that work well? Obviously, knowledge management is a good idea. I don't think we've got anybody saying that it's not. Are there any sort of further inputs on things that would be helpful in that? Keith, I see that you've got your hand up. Great.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I mean, I think reading the paper, I mean, the retaining staff with knowledge, particularly on senior staff, I mean, I agree with Kerry. As someone who was in a position for 22 years, I think I benefited from giving loads of notice. And so somebody was able to be brought in and work alongside me. Actually, we did it for a year, which is a huge benefit. So that was all transmitted. So particularly with senior staff who've been in post a long time, I think if you can do that, so that you've almost got a shadow for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. That may not need the approval of somebody like Ian Albert, who's got to do the budgets, but I think the long-term benefit for the organisation would mitigate that.
Yes, I mean, just to sort of come in there, obviously, as I say, you know, sort of managing my departure, one of the things that we decided to do was make all the moves in the HR team a month in advance. So everyone took on their new role, whilst particularly myself are still here to pick up any gaps in knowledge and give those people a bit of time to settle into those new roles. So we've done that alongside the knowledge management piece of work. Yes, it was a month, but you know, obviously a number of people are moving into different roles. Obviously, it's going to help with their development going forward. So yeah, definitely support that. That's another factor. So,
Kerry, is this a blueprint now for things can work going forward. Is this something that you've kind of captured and are able, the team will now be able to curate across the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I hope I can leave behind. We obviously, this is a discussion topic. It's not me presenting a method of something that we should do going forward. It's just to enable a discussion about, you know, an idea, if you like. I do hope that, particularly with senior roles where you've got people who are long serving with an awful lot of knowledge in their head, and perhaps a myriad of different things that they do, which they may not think immediately falls within their job description, but it's certainly part of what they do. To capture all that and pass that on to other people. So, you know, if something comes up all of a sudden, they think, gosh, what do I do about that? There is something to refer to help them. So I'd be very happy to sort of leave what I've done as a bit of a blueprint. Obviously, it was more intended for the team than anything else, because it's very detailed about what HR do. So not something to share publicly, but the principle of it is something perhaps we can, through HR, pick up via coaching, and particularly the leavers process for, you know, senior managers, and even, you know, even some staff who have quite a niche role, who may be doing different sort of work, but what they do is quite unique. So that's where I think it can come in and help. I mean, it might be helpful to have Jo say what she thinks about her handover.
I was just about to ask Jo that question. Jo, do you want to come
Yeah,
in?
thank you both. Yeah, I would reiterate really what Kerry said, in as much as it's been really helpful to have this last month, 5 or 6 weeks maybe, to sort of have a transitional period really. So in addition to having regular catch-ups, weekly catch-ups with both Rebecca and with Kerry, I've also been trying to hand over my current role duties to another colleague in the team who's going to be covering my role while I'm covering the maternity leave. And yeah, it has been helpful. I've already referred to both the handover document that Rebecca's left and also Kerry's knowledge capture document as well, and I'm sure I will continue to do, as I'm sure Ian will be, with a number of things, because I think there's some things with obviously the deletion of the corporate HR manager role. There's some things that will move up as well as move down to the HR services role. But yeah, no, it has been really helpful.
That's really good. And what about kind of your involvement in the leaver process across the organisation? Are you involved early enough to be able to impact on some of this knowledge management and the handover piece?
Certainly with those people who have been with us a long time, there's usually quite a long lead-in period of notice. So after X number of years, it's 12 weeks notice. So it's a significant bit of time to be able to manage that person leaving and do this piece of work to make sure that those that are taking over are well equipped. So I think we certainly got time to slot this in as part of something that we might do for particularly senior roles and roles where they deal with quite unique and complex things.
And HR are you're hearing about the resignations or people moving on. You're hearing about that immediately.
Yeah, the new process that we have with the new payroll system we've had since April requires the manager to input the leaving date as soon as the resignation or request to retire has been notified. They've been notified of, and that then forwards an email through to the HR help inbox. So yeah, very soon after receiving resignation or a notification of a retirement, we would be notified.
So ample opportunity for HR to get in and say, okay, that's great. this is how you're going to manage that and get that knowledge management piece. So presumably, given your early involvement there, that gives you the opportunity to retain the knowledge, even if you don't have the next role holder, because you've got early involvement in the leaver process. So there can be then a kind of, there's two things, aren't there? Pass it on to somebody else or put it in a pot somewhere for that person to open when they get there. Presumably you could do both with an early involvement.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we could highlight to managers. I think you know, service areas might already have some other plans in place, I guess, or whatever. I'm sure that there will be other ways that teams are capturing it. But yeah, perhaps the way forward would be to use the sort of the recommendations from Kerry's experience that we share, perhaps on the intranet, so that people can access that as and when.
Brilliant. Are there any other comments or questions on this subject?
May I?
Yes, go, Leah.
It's Lee, but that's okay. Often people say,
Sorry, Leah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I think this is great. The acknowledging of knowledge, of course, but it's reminded me of sort of sharing information in general, in terms of learning about what other staff members do in their jobs, what roles they have, what different teams do, because I do feel there's a lack of understanding between some teams about who does what and that sort of thing. So I know I've talked about this before, Matt, maybe not on this platform, but about in a staff briefing, each team having a little 10 minutes to present, this is who we are and this is what we do. And then when you've got someone leaving and you might have the new person shadowing them for ages, it might be nice for all staff to have the opportunity to shadow someone at some point, just for a day maybe, to learn about what their role is and what they do, and in doing that knowledge is getting shared on sort of in advance. Again, it's about, you know, the communication and making us aware of what each other does, and I think then as an organisation we'll run more smoothly because the wheels are being oiled.
Excellent. Apologies for mispronouncing your name.
Not a problem.
Do you want to come in on that, on the opportunities for knowledge sharing, not for people that are leaving, but for people that are remaining employed, and how we can help other people to understand what the rest of the organisation does?
Yeah, I agree. It's certainly something that, particularly working through the current period we're in, and even moving out the other side of it, if we are working away from the office more on an ongoing basis, we need to find new ways of talking to people more wide than just people we directly work with. And I think some of the ideas that Lee's come up with are things we'll take forward, both in the short term and the longer term as well. And in terms of things like job shadowing, I think that is a tool that can be part of someone's development, and it's something we sort of need to look at in terms of putting out guidance and how that feeds into the regular performance review process, because that could be one of the outcomes from a development need, would be some job shadowing, both for people involved in it.
I'm all for that, and finding the time is always going to be a challenge, but I think, as Lee rightly points out, it is really, you know, oiling those wheels and can have enormous benefits across the organisation in the longer term. So yeah, I think it's well worth doing. Are there any further comments or questions on this item? Claire?
Yeah, just on the sort of the knowledge transfer, and particularly when people are changing from job, if they got a promotion and somebody else is coming in to fill, it's actually recognising that there needs to be an official sort of knowledge transfer time frame. Again, if somebody's leaving the organisation, the new incumbent, ideally is to encourage to have a lap time period where, you know, when you talk about job shadowing and that before the older employee goes, either if they're moving to another role or out of the organisation. I just think it's very, very good to see it, because it's critical to an organisation to have the continuity going on when employees are changing roles.
So
yeah, great.
Oh, so go on, Kerry.
Yeah, sorry, just saying I agree definitely with that point. If we're hoping to recruit someone internally to succeed into different roles, then obviously we've got more time to work with individuals. I suppose the difficulty is if we advertise externally to fill that post. And again, this is probably where knowledge management can come in, because despite the fact that the person that held the post might be already gone by the time we've recruited, at least there will be some very good information left behind for that individual. It certainly works very well when we are, and hopefully it's something that we can do on a regular basis, because obviously we want to help people progress up the organisation. So certainly for internal recruitment, it's a bit of a role model to try and get going as soon as possible. So that handover becomes a lot easier for whoever it is that takes over.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Kerry, and thank you for prepping that for us. I really appreciate that. If there are no further comments or questions, then I suggest we move to item 7, which is suggested items for discussion topics in the future. And I think it's me that needs to lead this discussion. And thank you for putting together a list of suggestions there. It's very, very thorough. I'm going to throw this out there and say I think we ought to keep this fairly, as simple as possible, and focusing on things that perhaps wouldn't be discussed as part of our normal meeting. So it's quite clear from today that with agendas as they are and updates as they are, we will probably always have a conversation around wellbeing, mental health, and also probably around the diversity and equality agenda as well. So I wonder whether our discussion topics should be entirely separate from that to ensure that we're able to cover a really good base like we have today. Has anybody got any thoughts initially off that list, off that helpful list of what they might like to see in the future? I've got no hands up, which means I'll get my favourites. I'd like to see how the apprentices are doing, and I think given that I know one of the many legacies that Kerry will be leaving will be the work that has been done with apprentices, and how many we have and how good they are and how well they have done. I'd like to get a bit of an update on that. I think that's a good opportunity for great success, but I also think it's a really good opportunity to kind of discuss what we can do further. So that would be one of my favourite ones. And I think the other one that we will do well to kind of have a conversation around. So yeah, it's hard to choose one of them really, but I think that I would like to see the biannual update shaping our future. I think that's incredibly important, and looking at that kind of people strategy. One of the things that I think I do wish I had on this meeting is a little bit of a firmer strategic overview with KPIs in, and anyone that's seen me in any other meeting will know that that's a bit of a topic for me, but I would love to see what we are hoping to achieve and what we're measuring against. I know that we see that sometimes, but I think I'd like to see that as something that we can actually input in terms of discussion, and then moving forward into standard agenda items. I've now got some hands up, so I will go first of all to Terry, just because he's top of my list. Terry, did you have some comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the one thing we call up, which I saw very early on the list, was managing remote workforce. I think we're in that environment today, and we're going to continue with that environment for a very long time. So for me, it is to understand and to be sure that we are content with how we manage a remote workforce today and tomorrow might be very useful.
I agree with you, Terry. I think my point at the beginning of what I said there was that I'd like to see that as part of the HR update each time. I think that we are now in a position where managing a remote workforce is not going away, And rather than it being a discussion topic that we put on an annual basis, I'd like to see us having an update on that, because I think it fits really well with the well-being piece. I think it fits really well with communication and culture that we've talked about. So if it's okay with you, and I think I'm seeing you nod, that I'd like to keep that as part of the HR update and not as a separate discussion topic, because I think it's crucial that we do. Yeah, Claire, I can go to you.
Yes, one that actually, again, it's sort of related to this new, working environment, because there's so many different, I think, pressures on people when they are now working from home, and it's that work-life balance, and also for those that it's sort of bulleted here. It's well-being for carers and supporting employees with caring responsibilities, but for me, there's also with the new pressures, and particularly whether or not those caring responsibilities are for children or elderly and relatives. And I think it's because we're in a new world and a new environment, that has also sort of changed for those that are parents, or those that are also looking after the sort of elderly relatives, and also trying to do a work and job. And I think that might need, just sort of, again, with this new sort of world that we're in, it's just keeping an eye on that, because employees nowadays, I think, I've always said to people that work for me, it's not that you're actually sitting doing the work from sometimes 9 to 5, it's you get the work done. And if it means you've got to take an hour out during the middle of today because you've got to run around and help help an elderly relative, or sometimes maybe a neighbour, just even that sort of pop in to those people that are in isolation, you can make that time up later in an evening when it's quiet. And I think it's just knowing, employees knowing that it's okay to do that.
Thank you, Claire. I think that's sufficiently niche enough to not be covered in the HR update, and I'd support that being a specific discussion topic sooner in the forward plan. So yeah, that childcare and elder care piece is becoming more and more crucial.
It's also popping, it's also when we talk about the society we're living in, people will know that they might have a neighbour, and you could be that lifeline just to pop in and say hello when those people are in isolation as well.
Sorry, Kate. Yeah, Claire, that's fantastic. But on the one hand, I don't think things have changed that much in terms of what people are going through. And again, it's going back to supporting each individual. And when they feel supported, they're in a better place to do their caring and everything else. And I do agree, though, we have to carry on to making staff aware that it is okay to take that break as and when, for whatever reason. So yeah, it's absolutely essential.
I'm really keen to hear from the unions on what topics your members might be interested in us discussing, and what's high on their agenda. To put you on the spot there.
It's a bit. I would agree with particularly at the moment, and where people have been working from home with children who are off school and things like that has, I think, caused issues. So I'd agree with Claire that caring responsibilities are something that needs looking at overall. And I think as well, acknowledging the fact that in some teams you can't just stop for an hour. It really does need managing, and managing well, because, for example, in customer services, it needs the manager to understand the staff as well as the staff to understand the manager. It needs a good conversation point there. So yeah, that is something that I think needs looking at, and perhaps ideas would come out of that as to how to manage it better.
Thank you, Dee.
Cascaded.
Thank you, Dee. I think that's really helpful. I think we're all agreed that issue is one that is a good discussion topic moving forward. Keith, you're unmuted, but I don't see a hand. Is that because you want to speak?
No, I'm taking it all in. I'd agree with both of those. I was keen on the apprentices because we've got a good track record on that, and it is part of our council plan to encourage apprenticeships. So it's a very relevant topic. And then Claire's point on carers, I think both of those merit wider discussion.
We have been in the practice on occasions where we will do a separate update on a particular thing. Most commonly, we do sort of equality data updates, and usually during the year, pay and pension type changes. There's no reason why we couldn't bring a separate update to update on where we are with apprenticeships. As we put on the discussion topic there, you know, where we've come from and where we are now, because obviously we've been supporting apprentices since 2012, a very long period now. So it would be a nice piece of information to share. So we could do that as a separate update.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so that brings us almost to a close. But as we've talked about this is Kerry's last joint staff consultative committee. So I just want to say from on behalf of myself and the whole committee, thank you very much for the incredibly informative updates that you've always brought to us, for the putting up with all of our questioning. I hope they were mostly relevant, and for obviously all of your service that you've given to North Herts District Council. I don't want to take any words out of Ian's mouth, and I know that he wants to speak to you as well, Gary, but just on behalf of myself and the fellow committee, I want to say a huge thank you and wish you all the best in your retirement. Ian.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll echo what you're saying, Chair. Yeah, Kerry is leaving in about a week's time now. It's our last working day. It's come out very quickly since we started it. She's worked for North Herts for 18 years and put in a whole huge amount of effort and huge amount of support to everyone for that time. She did come from the Royal Mail, so has even more HR experience than just those 18 years. It's a huge amount over all that time. For her leadership of the HR team, which, you know, she's a well thought of manager, reflecting a number of staff in that team who have been probably with her for a big chunk of that 18 years in a few cases. You know, they work well together, and that's from Kerry's leadership. And there's been a lot of work that Kerry's done. I'm just going to pick out a few highlights of all the many that are there. So introduction to how you pay grade system, centralisation of HR around about 2004, I'm told. This is an awful my experience. I'm working with some notes here. Introduced home working in 2010, which has been a huge success, and the culture of home working in North Herts is phenomenal, and that's due to kind of the work that was put in at the early stage. Apprenticeship scheme already mentioned, that was in 2012, and then reorganisations and restructures and all those kind of usual things on top of that, and just the day-to-day as well. So, you know, I just want to say a big thank you to Kerry for all those years and all that experience. And you'll be a big loss, Kerry. And hopefully noise transfers worked well, and we've captured as much as we can. But you'll still be a loss even with that noise transfer. So a big thank you, Kerry.
Well, that's very kind of you, Ian. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure working for the council for all these years, and I've always enjoyed our joint staff consultative committee discussions. Lovely to have members, you know, understanding what HR do and a little bit of healthy discussion about it. So it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, I won't go on. Get emotional, but safe to say, Kerry, you're leaving behind many legacies, so thank you. And with that, that's a wrap. The meeting's done. Thank you all for attending, and I'll see you all next time, except for Gary.